Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for Unlocking Leadership in Arts Education. We're grateful to once again share virtual space with you all and kick off an exciting new learning session with you and the brilliant Constellation residents. My name is Ariel Frost, Ingenuity's Manager of Partnerships and Learning, and I'm also joined here today by my colleague, Ingenuity's Director of Partnerships and Learning, Courtney Cintron. And we're also joined here today by Ingenuity's 23-24 Constellation residents. Tyra Bullock, Associate Director of Education at Writers Theater, Andrew DeMuro, Director of Program Quality at Guitars Over Guns, Elena Huang, Teaching Artist, Chicago Metamorphosis Orchestra Project, Sophia Paget Perez, the Artistic Director of CPS Lives, and Liz Rice, Manager of Curriculum and Education at Second Story. This dynamic group of arts education leaders who represent both arts organizations and CPS schools will be working together and with Ingenuity over the next several months to develop new and innovative learning institutes that elevate key areas of their expertise, research, and experience to you all, creating a constellation of learning and knowledge sharing. Thank you to all of the residents for this thoughtful work and collaboration, and thank you to all of you for being part of this dialogue and learning journey. Today's Introductory conversation and the conversations throughout the year will center on what it means to be an arts education leader and how you can further unleash your own leadership and help cultivate and amplify the leadership of others. I'm going to hand things off to Courtney for a moment to tell us a little bit more about this year's focus and the program evolution.
Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. It's great to be here with you. We're very excited. So how did this theme come about? So on an annual basis, arts organizations elevate topics to Ingenuity in our Partnerships and Learning Survey, communicating their high priority learning areas for the year. So we heard that as we continue to emerge from the pandemic, there is a need to define both our individual and collective roles as it pertains to reimagining, rebuilding structures and systems within arts organizations and within the classroom. And we too know that good leadership plays a crucial role in creating arts environments where students, teaching artists, arts teachers, and administrators can identify their own strengths and leadership, and where their unique experiences and approaches are fully honored. So practices and approaches on these topics evolve quickly. So we're excited to come together to build consensus on current and effective practices from the folks that are centering this work in schools, in arts classrooms, and within their arts organizations. So a little bit about the beginnings of Constellation. So Ingenuity has been presenting learning institutes designed for arts partners since its inception in 2011. Our facilitators and topics have varied widely over the years, and we've had a considerable amount of content breadth. And as our programs and understandings have evolved, we started to consider how we could further expand on this work and take a more in-depth look at a topic and understand it from different perspectives and approaches. So Constellation's Teaching and Learning Development Program, which launched at the outset of 2021, at the 2021 school year, was designed for this purpose, to take a content area and really engage with it from different angles through an exchange between our teaching and learning residents and you all. So this is our third year with the program, our third incredible cohort, and the third topic for discussion. So we started back in 2021 with trauma-informed and healing-centered practices. Then in 2022, we zeroed in on accessibility and inclusion. And this year, once again, we're focusing on leadership in arts education. So in addition to the resulting learning institutes that hopefully you all will be joining us for, the program is designed to support a community of arts education leaders, our residents, whom you'll meet later today, in their own growth and development through peer and one-on-one collaboration, access to Ingenuity tools, data, research, marketing and communication supports, stipends for the development and delivery of their learning sessions, and assistance with the workshop design, delivery, and evaluation of those learning sessions. And additionally, drawing on Ingenuity's commitment to equity, the program structure aims to decentralize expertise in adult learning opportunities by expanding knowledge, teaching, and creating a facilitator network that elevates the arts partner voice. Also prioritizing knowledge sharing and cultivating a partner-to-partner learning network that can collectively contribute to the growth and learning of arts education partners. So that's a little bit about Constellation. Before we move further into today's program, I'd like to pass things back to Ariel to get us started with a land acknowledgement and tell you a little bit more about what's in store today.
Thank you so much, Courtney. We'd like to acknowledge that today's virtual program is taking place on the stolen and unceded land of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa nations. Because of the Great Lakes, the land naturally became a site of travel, healing, trade, and gathering for many Native tribes, and is still home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois that still practice their traditions and care for the land. These acknowledgements are not just about something in the past. Colonialism is a current and ongoing reality, and it's important to build mindfulness of our present participation. As we begin today's program, let's honor these ancestral grounds and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide, and begin to rethink our own relationship with this land and its original peoples. Okay. To get everyone oriented in today's virtual space, we have a few housekeeping items for you. Closed captioning is available. Slides and handouts will be available following the session, and a recording will be available on our YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. You can submit questions via the QA feature in the webinar, and polls will appear on your screen. And then finally, at the end, you will be directed to an exit survey. So please complete the exit survey before you go. And that way I won't have to bother you about it with emails later. Okay, our agenda for today we'll start off with welcome and introductions, then a poll of who's in the room. Then I'll introduce you to the panelists and we'll get brief session previews about what they'll be talking about this year. And then we'll get into the thick of it with our panel discussion, followed by a short Q&A and closing announcements. So we've done a good amount of talking. So now we'd want to hear from you in this anonymous poll and get a sense of where everyone is coming from. So we would like to know what roles one role or multiple roles that you, how you would describe your role in arts education, how many years you've been in the field of arts education, and in what arts disciplines does your organization operate? And the answers keep rolling in. Very close to full participation. Getting there. Just a couple more. So it's looking like most of our folks identify as teaching artists and program staff, followed by just a couple of executive directors, maybe a few people doing some development and fundraising, and at least one CPS teacher. So yay, that's great. Most of our years, I love this question. We've got 20% who can count their time in the field of arts education in decades rather than years. 29% are 5 to 10, and a few are 10 to 20. I'm really happy to see 19% of 0 to 3 and 10% of 3 to 5. So we've got like a great breadth all across the spectrum. And it looks like also we have a really great breadth across disciplines. Music is pretty high, but we've got someone here from all the disciplines. All righty, excellent.
Okay, so in addition to our Who's in the Room poll, we're going to take a little bit of a moment to ground and try and forget the restrictions and the limitations that sometimes prevent us from believing in ourselves as leaders and being bold. So with that, just take a moment now to think about the following question we're going to pose, and you're going to put it in the chat, but don't press send just yet. Just hold for a moment. But if fear didn't exist, what's something brand new that you'd try to do? So this can be big or small, so don't worry too much about creating the right response. But put that in the chat, don't press enter or send yet. Okay, and then on the count of 3, we're going to create a waterfall and press the send button or the enter button at the same time. So 1, 2, 3.
Okay, let's look at some of these. Someone says I'll create more agency and understanding around education within arts organizations, skydiving, being a solo singing artist. Wow, modeling clothing for people with bodies and spirits like mine. Yes. Move abroad. I said I'd start my own school. Move to another country tomorrow. Hire full-time teaching artists. I love these. Christine would become a film director. Wow, these are amazing, y'all. You are some inspiring arts leaders for sure. These are amazing visions, and hopefully today we'll get a little closer to thinking about how to unlock your leadership and make some of these things a reality. So without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce our fearless residents to you all. I'll start off by telling you a bit about each resident, and then I'll ask them to elaborate with some more specific questions. And just for funsies, I like to go in reverse alphabetical order by last name. So we will start with Liz Rice. Liz is the manager of curriculum and education at Second Story. As an arts and education administrator for over 10 years, she's experienced in working with emerging to established theater and nonprofit organizations. Liz believes that education is a long life pursuit, that everyone should have access to a quality education, and that stories have the ability to build strong and profound connections between people. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Ariel. Hi, everybody.
So, Liz, I'm so happy you're here. So what I'd love for you to do is tell us a little bit about why you applied for this residency, briefly what your session will be about, and then for a little fun get to know you, who is a fictional leader that inspires you?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I've been in arts education for about 10 years now. I was previously the school programs coordinator at the Goodman Theater. I'm now the manager of education and curriculum at Second Story. And so one of the things that really made me apply for this program was I wanted to grow my own understanding as a mid-career arts administrator and education administrator of what leadership really looks like, my own practice, and what I can learn more from other folks. I oversee a lot of contracted teaching artists and facilitators, and I want to grow how I can support them as the folks who are in the classroom. So I'm hoping to learn more from the other leaders that are on this panel today in the field and as we continue this cohort. As a manager, one of the things I have to do is give and receive a lot of feedback to and from our facilitators. So my session is titled Creative Feedback as a Tool for Arts Education Leadership. So at Second Story, one of our artistic practices that we use is Liz Lerman's critical response process. That's something that we've brought into the classrooms and brought to our students as well. But we've noticed that it actually applies in our administrative and managerial practices as well. So we are thinking about in this session how we can empathetically give and receive feedback to each other, and which ultimately leads to growth and success in our programs as arts educators. And what's the
Great.
fun question I'm supposed to ask?
Yeah, who's that fictional leader that inspires you?
Yes. So I have been a lifelong Trekkie, and so when I'm thinking about my own leadership practice, I tend to look at Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek Next Generation and Catherine Janeway. They're both leaders that exist in a hierarchical structure, but they tend to show a lot of compassion and empathy for their team. They take into account their team members' expertise and experience when making decisions, and they take steps to know the lives of even their secondary and tertiary staff members. And so I try and embody that in my own practice in my work.
I love that so much, Liz. My family's huge into Star Trek as well. My older sister was literally born watching Star Trek, so we'll definitely talk about that some more. But next, I would love to introduce you all to Sofia Paget Perez. Sofia is the artistic director of CPS Lives. She's a Venezuelan-American interdisciplinary artist, educator, and organizer from Miami, Florida. And she received her BFA with an emphasis in photography and art therapy from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which is where they currently reside. Hi, Sofia.
Hi, Ariel.
So tell us a little bit about what led you to apply for this residency, a little bit about your session, and a fictional leader that inspires you.
Yeah, so I applied to this residency to be able to get the opportunity to sort of get outside of my very small team, get outside of that vacuum of, arts administration sometimes that we can get in with our organizations and learn from the other cohort members as well and be in community with folks who are doing similar work. And I've been really inspired by everybody so far and really looking forward to continue the residency. And then my learning webinar will be Synergy in Action, Cultivating Leadership Through Arts and Public School Collaboration. So during this learning session, we're going to be looking at ways in which community partnerships and city-based resources for art education should be directly looking at the needs and interests of neighborhoods for creating specific learning models and reflecting on the diverse school district of Chicago. We're going to be thinking about implementation of collaboration with other arts organizations from neighborhood to neighborhood and addressing the unique arts education needs each community desires. And then, oh yeah, the last question, fictitious leader, which I realized I answered it incorrectly before because I was talking about real people, but my fictitious leader is Lauren Alamina from Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. And she is just a crazy, incredible young lady who is navigating the world through a social and climate apocalypse, basically. And I am extremely inspired by the way that she is cultivating knowledge of the land in order to access freedom and, come into her own as a adult in this world. So thanks.
Excellent. Sci-fi nerd number 2. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Next, I'd love to introduce you to Elena Huang. Elena teaches viola at the Chicago Metamorphosis Orchestra Project, where they are also a proud alum. And Elena hopes to inspire students to be compassionate musicians and lifelong lovers of music. They strive to create spaces of belonging and collaboration in all of their ensembles. Hi, Elena.
Hi, Ariel. It's nice to see everyone today. Yes, I'm very excited for this panel.
Oh, I am also very excited. So tell us a little bit about why you applied for this residency, what your learning session will be about, and your fictional leader that inspires you.
Yes, so I am a teaching artist at the Chicago Metamorphosis Orchestra Project. I've been teaching across Chicago for about 2.5 years now, but I just started teaching at this orchestra about like a year ago. I also graduated from this program, so I used to be a student here. And coming back and becoming a teacher has been very inspiring to me. And I like the work that we do in that our students are not just focused on the music, but we're focused on helping them grow as people as well. In addition to that, I somehow have managed to find myself transitioning into both teaching and admin. So I'm taking on the role of community engagement coordinator and partnerships coordinator as well at this program, which leads me to why I joined this cohort because I really love connecting with other teaching artists and sharing ideas. As we all know, teachers thrive best when we work as a team together, and especially jumping into more of an admin combined role. Just learning from other leaders and artistic directors really helps me kind of understand my own role better as I grow into it. But yeah, just networking and sharing ideas with each other. My presentation is called Crescendo, Amplifying Youth Leadership in Arts Education. And for this presentation, I'm hoping to get different perspectives from my current students and show what our program is doing to implement more opportunities for student leadership and taking charge of classes and rehearsals in our own program, and planning to interview other programs and teachers as well so that I can collect a little bit of a website compendium of like all of these different experiences and hopefully provide ideas on how to increase these roles in both just like one-on-one teaching and if you're leading like a whole group of students as well.
Excellent. And then tell us about your fictional leader that inspires you.
My fictional leader that inspires me is from the TV show called The Owl House. It's on Disney Plus. And the main character, Luce, from the show really inspires me because she's also a student, but she takes leadership in such a way where it just kind of comes naturally. And she wants to make sure that everyone in like her group, or like even her friends that are like battling with her, like taking charge with her, are accounted for. No matter how like tense it gets or intense it gets with the people that she interacts with, she finds a way to mediate and sees the perspective of everyone in the big picture and small at the same time.
Thanks so much for that, Elena. I love that show as well. Okay, next we have Andrew DeMuro. Andrew is the director of program quality at Guitars Over Guns. He brings over a decade of personal and professional lived experience as an active singer-songwriter, a trailblazer in public education, and an arts nonprofit leader. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Ariel. Hey, everybody in the Zoom room.
So tell us a little bit about why you applied, what your session's about, and also your fictional leader that inspires you.
Absolutely. So, like most folks on this call, I am always energized by opportunities that allow leaders in our sector to get together and collaborate with one another. And Ingenuity, for me, has been providing opportunities like this for years. But particularly now, as someone who just in the last year has transitioned into a new leadership position in the same organization that I've been working for 7 years, I'm just constantly reminded that like my ability to drive change in my own position is only as strong as the folks that I have around me who are pushing me to drive that change and also inspiring it through what I learn about how they do their work and the stories that they tell. So I'm excited to be here. And I'm also excited for my session coming up, which is called From Band Member to Board Member, Developing a Culture of Student Leadership in Arts Education. I think whether you are a teaching artist or a program director or a school leader or any combination of those things, when you're working with young people, we have big dreams for them, for our students and for our alumni that include them coming back to be gainfully employed by our organizations, or even to be in a seat that allows them to make some of the big decisions that move the organization forward. I also recognize it can be tough to envision that 11-year-old who's picking up an instrument for the first time as a future program director or a member of your board. So I'm going to be joined by a student of mine who is currently a high school senior, but has been a participant in our program since they were in 6th grade. And they have aspirations themselves of becoming a music teacher someday. So we're going to talk to them about their experience in our program and ask specifically questions like, what inspired you to come back for your second day? What inspired you to come back for your second year? And what inspired you to then sit in a position where they're at now, which is they spend time every month mentoring students in our program in the middle school that they graduated from 4 years ago. So there's a lot to talk about, and they're also going to be playing a few original songs that kind of commemorate some of those key moments in their trajectory so far. So if you like live music, please come out and join us. And then a fictional leader who inspires me is Ted Lasso, who folks on this call may know from the Apple TV show Ted Lasso. I am not a soccer fan myself, but I binge watched most of this show at once. And by the second episode, I was like furiously taking notes in my phone on the leadership strategies that I saw this soccer coach from Kansas using to build culture and community on his team. So if you lead a team of any kind, that is a show that I would recommend watching and learning from.
Thanks so much for that, Andrew. You are not the first person who has told me to watch that show, so it's definitely on my list. And then the last but certainly not least is my girl Tyra Bullock. Tyra is an actor, educator, and arts administration leader, and serves as the Associate Director of Education at Writers Theater. Through her work, she strives to create dialogue that promotes empathy and empowers those who feel unseen by society. Hi, Tyra.
Hello, how's it going?
It's great. So tell us a little bit about why you joined this residency. Tell us about your session, which I'm very excited about, and a fictional leader that inspires you.
Absolutely. So I was really drawn to the Constellations cohort because I'm always looking for new opportunities to develop. I started off as an intern and just kind of went through this cycle of different roles of leadership, and now I'm currently the Associate Director of Education at Writers Theater. So I'm really excited for the opportunity to work with other leaders who wear different hats and also practice arts disciplines that are different from my own. So excited about that. And then I was also really drawn to the opportunity to talk about something that I'm really passionate about. And so my learning seminar is actually called Empowering Perspectives, Centering Black Voices in Arts Ed Leadership. So in this seminar, we'll be addressing some of the common challenges that are faced by Black arts ed leaders in the field, and also discuss effective practices for supporting them at all levels of leadership. So if you identify as a teaching artist or a manager, director, board of trustee, either or, right? This seminar is for you. And then, okay, so fictional leader. I love Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think it is one of the best, if not the best, animated shows of all time. Remove the animation, just period, right? And Aang, who's like the lead, I guess, the main protagonist of the show. I really identify with him as a leader because he has these core values that he holds dear throughout the entire series. And it really helps guide every decision that he makes. He's also a strong collaborator, and he's constantly growing. Anytime he's faced with a new challenge or decision, he's always trying to be a better version of himself. And I love that he's able to recognize that. And I feel like I recognize that in myself. So that's who.
Thank you so much for that, Tyra. And this question has been so fun to hear everyone answer. So it's also, it's really apropos that Tyra was the last one to answer the question, because that was her question that was sort of an icebreaker in one of our cohort meetings. So now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty, what you've been waiting for, the Unlocking Arts Education Leadership panel discussion. Our residents have worked together over the last several weeks to develop essential questions for today's discussion, and we've grouped the questions into 3 categories: identifying leadership, leadership transitions, and advocating as a leader. For each section, we'll ask the residents to both pose and discuss their questions in pairs. Please make note of anything that resonates with you as we move through. So if you have any questions as we move along, you can enter them into the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to your question in our Q&A portion at the end. So here we go, transitioning to our first topic, identifying leadership. There's often a perception that if you have a title that you're the leader, and the longer the better. And we often look to people with these titles as primary sources of leadership. But we were also wondering as a cohort, is that the only measure? So in this section, our residents will pose and discuss questions that help us to understand what leadership is and who can be considered a leader. With that, I'll hand it off to our first resident pair to get us started, Liz and Tyra.
And we're back. Yeah, so as we were planning and thinking through, this panel, one of the very first questions that we thought of is, how do we even identify leadership in arts education, and who can we, begin to consider as a leader? And so, Tyra, I'm curious if you had any initial thoughts about that.
I do. First, in addressing that, right? There definitely is this stigma that leadership means that you're at the top of organizational hierarchy or something, and that's really not the case. So first, like in thinking about what exactly does it mean to be a leader, right? Which we've talked about in our meetings. But one of the key qualities of a leader, is to identify and cultivate the strength in others, being able to recognize that in yourself, being empathetic and understanding, creating space for others, installing a sense of empowerment, encouraging others, being a collaborator, listening to others that are also part of whatever this task is that you have at hand, and also just valuing others' ideas in the journey of reaching that goal. And that can apply to whomever. I see it all the time, even in the classroom with our students. Something as simple as having our first volunteer create that Tableau image with their bodies, or having a brave soul do a cold reading for a script, or even being an ambassador for their youth council. Those are all prime examples of leadership. So it can come in many different forms. You could be a student, you could be a teacher, you could be a teaching artist, you could have an administrative title, or it could be as high as a board of trustee. It comes in many different forms, but if you are able to embrace those qualities of a leader, then that means that's who you are. But I am curious to hear from you too, Liz.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was thinking about is this idea that everybody has expertise, right? And they bring it to whatever space that we're bringing in. And so, you know, we talked about that title in the introduction, right? And it's like this assumption, but often as a person who has a title, I am actually looking towards the folks that I'm working with, right? The teaching artists that we work with have a lot more expertise, an idea of, classroom management, how to set up the curriculum for the students that they're working with. So I'm actively looking at them and supporting them because they have that strength already as well. And I see that in the classroom, as you're pointing out with students, right? I think one of the ways that we can support leadership is really supporting when we see those qualities where people are showing their expertise, showing their strength in the classroom, whether it be, the co-teachers the classroom co-teachers we're working with, our teaching artists, or even the students as well. So really, for me, like, leadership comes from all sides, right? And it's the folks that at the top should really look for leadership from the bottom to really push the goal of whatever project or program that you're doing forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with that.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw it over to Sophia and Elena, because I think they have some more thoughts about our next question that really start to deal with this.
Thanks so much, Liz. Yeah, I think in our last conversation, we were sort of thinking about, we're working in one of the largest school systems in the United States. And so how do we as organizations working as partners with schools ensure that we're engaging communities, and this could be the students, the school staff, and the parents, in ways that honor and respect their existing leadership, culture, and values? And I'd love to hear from Elena about their experiences with this.
Yes, I've had to think a lot about this. Definitely have a lot of different perspectives, having been a CPS student as well in one of these kinds of programs. But having more of like a teaching role, I find that it can be a little hard to balance. I think trying to just run your program and teach as well while you're in the midst of like being an after school program and being like in a way constricted by like the roles and like the hierarchy of being in a public school. The very first thing that I find helpful is a lot of the culture and learning what that is comes from the students themselves. Like they'll definitely tell you how things go, or if you're like in a school that has like certain rules on like behavior, other things, like you can kind of tell like what they're used to in your program versus when they're at school. The other important thing that has been helpful for me, having started with kind of more of a community engagement role, has just been like even reaching out to all of the music teachers that already teach like during the day there, and people are really happy to help out as well and help kind of get you acclimated to like a new environment. Uh, a lot of it is just kind of working in communication and increasing all of that between different leaders in the school, even if you guys are in different groups as well. I don't know if you have like more on this, Sophia, but you also work in a CPS school. I'd love to hear what you have to share as well.
Yeah, definitely. Particularly in my role, I am working with about 15 to 20 different artists each year. So that means that we're working in, 15 to 20 different schools each year. And something that I'm always telling my artists, my teaching artists, is like they come with us with sort of a project proposal or things that they're really interested in working with their schools. And I tell them to never be too tied to that, because once you actually start to get ingrained in your school community and get to talk with them, the teachers, the faculty, the principals, and the students, that might change, because as they get to learn and understand those communities more, their goals for their projects might change, and they get feedback from the students and the staff who, particularly when you're speaking with the teachers, they know so much about their students and already know so much about their needs and desires for different creative opportunities for themselves. And so, and thinking about like there should never be, like a one size fits all kind of like approach to how we're working with our schools, because each of them have such a rich history and such a rich culture that they're already so invested in. And as guests coming into the school, it's really important that we honor that and have, meaningful conversations about the needs and wants for the students as well. So yeah, definitely. Did you have anything else to add to that, Elena?
Yeah, I love that point too, where just the more that we can communicate and find ways to kind of bridge communication between everyone involved, that really helps with just establishing an organization within a school and really becoming a part of the community rather than just being an extra part of it in a way, like extra program. Um, Definitely, like a last thing I wanted to share too, like with our school, we have a lot of parents who are like speaking different languages other than English, and even just finding a way to translate documents or
Yeah,
even as teaching
absolutely.
artists trying to pick that up in the classroom is really helpful and a good way to get parents more involved, especially.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of conversations I've been having with teachers just this year is the importance of having multilingual teaching artists working in the schools, as there's been such a large surge of particularly like Venezuelan immigrants coming to Chicago. And there are, they'll say that they have, over 100 new students coming in, and many of them don't speak English. And so how are we, being able to provide all of our students with opportunities for creative learning, but in a way that really caters to how they are looking at the world and how, how they can sort of navigate that process when they're already, going through such a drastic change in their lives as well. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Elena. I'm going to pass it over to Liz and Andrew.
Thanks, Sophia. Thanks, Elena. I appreciate all these questions and responses, not just because they're so rich and detailed, but also because they kind of piggyback right into the next question. And I think something that's a byproduct of creating an engaging program that students, parents, community stakeholders are excited about is that you get kids who want to come back year over year in different and elevated capacities. And something that we talked a lot about in our original planning meeting was, what do you do with those kids who want to come back year over year, who want to try new things, but maybe don't fully see their own leadership capacity in themselves yet? What is our responsibility as teaching artists, as program managers and directors, to kind of show them the forest through the trees a little bit? And so what I want to talk about with you, Liz, is some of the rituals and habits that you can implement in your organization today to create that sense of belonging and that sense of community that engages students as leaders beyond the classroom and into their futures.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was really thinking about this question, I thought about two examples. And first, I was thinking about like, what is it that we can do in the classroom already? And so a lot of us on the call are arts educators, right? So we probably already bring community agreements or like group agreements into the classroom. One of the things that we do at Second Story is really ask students for their input. So we have agreements that we bring and then ask for input on how they expect us as, you know, the adults in the room to behave with them as well, and start building that sense of communities that they have ownership from the get-go of the artistic practice that we're about to do together. In addition to that, I was thinking very specifically about a program that we ran in a ninth grade high school classroom last year, in which the students were all writing their own personal narrative stories, but then we put them into little artistic collaborative groups. And one of the things that we really emphasized was giving them the choice as to which role they wanted to take. And honoring, you know, the choices that they made. So some of the stories we heard were beautiful, but those folks didn't want to be tellers, right? They wanted to be directors or sound designers, which is how we think about our artistic practice collaboratively. And so we got to really see students who wanted to be in front of the classrooms shine. And then we started to see those connections that students were making between you know, choosing the song, and as directors, like, how do you get my group members all to be on the same page, right? And so I think, you know, building in experiences that allow folks to lead from their expertise, building in choices, right? So that was sort of one of the like immediately like what we can do in the classroom thoughts that I had. And thinking forward, I was also thinking about, all right, how do we build that out from just not being immediately in the classroom, but into the future? And I think if we're going to build spaces where we want art and artists to bloom, then we have to also be thinking about and scaffolding opportunities for growth in the future. Right. So, and really, you know, I think, Andrew, you're going to talk about this in your session, but building it in a way that those students who are game have input into what that looks like. And not just, you know, after the program, but thinking as far as to like when they're in college, and then after college, right? Are we building in internships for students? Are we building in roles for them to actually get hired by us in the future as well? So I know that you have been thinking about this. I'm going to pass the baton back to you because this is like the core of what you've been thinking about as part of our cohort.
Yeah, and I'm fortunate that now this is a big part of my job, is to figure out what is it that you know, to your point about giving students choice and ownership from day one, what is it that they're asking us for in their time in our programs? What are some of the barriers in real life that are preventing them from coming back year over year that maybe we don't have as much control over or as much insight into if we don't ask them? And how can we accommodate for kids who want to be here, are facing some barriers, and maybe just need a mentor or an adult in their lives who are a few years further down the road and can create those opportunities and those spaces for them now. And one of the ways that we've done that in our organization is particularly for young people who start with our program as 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. We're thinking critically about what that transition from 8th grade to high school looks like, as well as the transition from high school to post-high school. But what's going to make a kid who's leaving 8th grade and navigating the challenges of being a CPS high school student, of which we know there are many, what's going to make them want to come back and be part of this community in an elevated capacity? And so part of what we do is create a ritual, and we just started kind of doing this recently, where we want kids to understand how the skills that they're learning in the arts apply to their lives outside of the arts and outside of school. And so a thing that we've started doing recently is this ritual of taking 8th graders, graduating 8th graders on a creative artist retreat in Lake Geneva, where they get to be out in nature, experiencing something that they've maybe never experienced before, and use that as an opportunity to write, to create music, and to record. And then from that experience, we also let them know, like, hey, we have some programming opportunities available to you in high school. And they actually look more like a job or an internship than they do look like an after school program. We pay students a stipend to be part of our high school programs. We also try and create programs that have a college or career readiness focus, one of which is a program that has a peer mentoring focus. So for kids who are graduating from our 8th grade programs, part of their responsibility then is to go back and learn peer mentoring skills, and serve at the middle school sites where some of them graduated from, working with kids who are just a little bit younger than them, and starting to get those teaching skills in as high school age students. And just that opportunity to start working on that earlier than your high school graduation gives you work experience. It gives you an adult in your life who's going to probably write you a letter of recommendation. And it opens up a world to you that maybe otherwise you wouldn't get until after you were 18 already, or after you're 2 years into college and still unsure of what it is that you want to do with your life. And so those rituals from that young age kind of allows for a springboard for them to get to where they're going to earlier than we did, which hopefully creates that autonomy and that ownership that you were talking about with group agreements and the ability to make choices and things like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know
no-
where.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like those are some really great opportunities for students who are transitioning from one place to another. And speaking of transitions, we're gonna transition to talking about transitions. So within the arts education ecosystem, it's not uncommon to transition from a leadership role, such as a teaching artist that has a closer proximity to students and the classroom, to one that's further removed from the realities on the ground. And in this next section, our residents will discuss their experiences with these transitions and the ways it's impacted their leadership. So Elena and Tyra, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Ariel. Yes, Tyra, hello. How are you? Let's see. Tyra, are you here?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hello.
Hi. Apologies. My internet's kind of been going in and out.
That's okay. We're glad you're here. All right, so diving into leadership transition, me and Tyra are very excited to answer this question because we've definitely had to think a lot about that in the last year, especially. But our first question is, what do transitions from one type of leadership to another look like? For instance, how do you transition from a teaching artist role to an admin or combined role?
Yeah. So first I'll start by answering this a little bit more broader, and then I'll kind of zoom in on that specific example of teaching artist to administrator. So I would say that no matter what role you're assuming, it's always important to have that core understanding of why you're doing the work that you're doing. That often means like establishing professional goals that will align with the company's mission, or sometimes that means just creating your own personal goals and that motivates you in the work that you're doing. When seeking out opportunities like that, I'd say that it's really important for you to have a clear understanding of what that role requires. So understanding expectations, really. Having clear responsibilities will allow you to know what are the parameters of the job, what even collaboration or leadership will look like in that new capacity, understanding how you can best support the folks who are involved in the success of whatever the programs are that you're serving or being part of. And then specifically for a teaching artist transitioning to an administrative role, I would really advise that person to first draw from their own experiences. What are the things that they've taken notice of that work, or things that could use a little bit more focus and attention based on their experiences in the classroom with students or teachers, or at community organizations, because I truly believe that that influences the kind of programming that you would want to create. I also feel like it's important for you to do research, looking into whatever company that you're interested in, jumping into that administrative, looking into their past programming, seeing what else is out there at other institutions, and also really having in-depth conversations with the community that you're going to be serving. It's supposed to be a mutual beneficial relationship. It's not supposed to be parasitic. So you should never come into a role and think, oh, I have all these ideas and I want to create this and create that. Okay, but also know your audience. What is the purpose in doing this? What are we trying to achieve? And that, again, is why it's always important to draw from that core value, or that foundation that's already been established. And then another part of the question, I think you said, was like, if this is a combined role. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? When you say combined role, do you mean you're an administrator who sometimes teaches for that same organization, or are you saying you're an administrator who does teaching artistry for other organizations?
Yes, so I can elaborate on this since I do have a combined role, and I know it's different for every program, but I started off just teaching viola and violin at my program, and more recently we had some positions opening up where, for our organization, in order to grow, we wanted to really have one person focus on just correspondence and communication between like the school staff, so principals, for our after school program, and fellow teachers, and also parents and parent engagement. And that's been an interesting one because I am still teaching as well during our regular program hours, so I don't get to really think about admin stuff like actively, except maybe I do have insight into that while teaching. But a lot of my admin stuff is working directly with like our executive director and also our program manager. So for me, like my role as like combined admin teaching staff is interesting because I get to be kind of a bridge between the students and more people who just focus on only admin and behind the scenes type of roles. I find that a role that's combined like mine is very useful for organization as well, because we've talked a little bit about in our cohort meeting about how the further along you get like with an admin role, it can feel like you're getting farther away from like your students and understanding like what they need, or it's a lot more to carry on your shoulders. But the more that you can collaborate with other teaching artists, and even just talking to students one-on-one, or working with other people who have a combined role where they're actively in the classroom but also understand the logistics of like fundraising and planning, I find that like for me, I kind of can be like, hey, like our students are like out of strings, or like they're out of rosin, and other things like that, where I get to kind of pick up on little details that I can only see during the day while teaching, and then be the messenger for everyone else who is working behind the scenes for us too.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in a really unique position, I'd say. Because sometimes that does happen, right? When you are just in that role of an administrator, then you're not able to have as much in-person interaction with students and teachers, and those are the people that we're serving. So it's always good to be in those spaces for sure.
Yeah, I really like too that you brought up the point of staying connected to your why from the very beginning. I think it's really hard when you transition sometimes to from just teaching to admin, because it can feel like such a shift in like your own personal goals. But even just remembering like that essence of like, I became a teacher and I want to help this organization for like the reason that I came into it in the first place, I think that'll help out a lot too. like juggling all of these different things at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you
think
for your
it'll also
response. Oh,
like
sorry. Yes.
no, you're good. I was also gonna say it also helps like when you're trying to advocate for the programs that you're administering to, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because we can only rely on so many surveys and assessments, but actually being there in person and being able to testify to how these programs are beneficial, it really does help to give perspective to the benefits and for people who don't have the opportunity to be in those spaces, like let's say stakeholders like funders, right? They typically are not in those spaces. They have to kind of jump through hoops in order to come to some of those schools too because of their policy for visitors. But being there to witness and to experience it, it's a whole different ball game. So if
Yeah.
anything, Elaine, I would say that that's to your benefit.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Tyra, for your input as well. I think we're going to transition it over to Andrew and Sophia for our next question.
Yeah, and Elena and Tyra, you've given us quite the springboard here, because we're going to talk about kind of exactly where you left off. And it might be interesting here to see what our audience thinks. Put a 1 in the chat if you're in the audience and you're someone who has elevated or transitioned into an additional or a new leadership role within your own organization, just within your tenure as having been there. Already seeing some 1s. Okay, so we're in good company here. I'm also one of those people, and the attention that I've wrestled with for years is around what the responsibility of a leader is to stay connected to the ground level work, when oftentimes your reward, your promotion, involves adding a layer of distance between you and the most foundational work of your organization. So you are someone who is strategizing and making decisions about the future of the organization, but not necessarily someone who is living the experience of the work in real time. We're going to talk about, Sophia and I, what some of our strategies are to stay connected to the work, even through those additional layers that we're provided sometimes. So, Sophia, how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that is vitally important, I think, to a role as a leader, because without the context for what you're sort of creating a lot of times from behind a computer screen or through emails, through all of that, that is what is going to propel you forward in terms of like cultivating a lot more for the partnerships that you're having. And I think for me personally, something that I always try to do is always go to those first meetings with the schools and the artists and be, that liaison in person, because seeing the school, having, the knowledge of what they need, what they have, what they don't have, particularly thinking about like supplies for students, like thinking about, whether or not they even have arts curriculum already in place. Seeing that firsthand is what really provides me with a lot of context for how I should move forward with that partnership and how I can best support our teaching artists and our schools for the arts organization or the arts like curriculum that they're working with. And I think, being creative with it as well. We can't always be there in person, especially if you're working with as many schools, a lot of schools like I am. I can't always be there in person all the time, but getting creative with the conversations that I'm having with the teachers and the principals, and getting really getting to know the administration on a really deep level. And it's really amazing because I have, created all these relationships with schools that we always go back to. And, if I have an artist that comes up to me, it's like, I'm really like excited about this kind of project. I'm like, oh, I know exactly which school would be interested in working with you on this, and the things that they're already thinking about and the things that they're already, dreaming about for their students to be participating in creative ways. So it's really important. And I would super encourage everybody who's working in an arts admin level to remove yourself from the sort of screen in front of us as much as possible and jump at the opportunity to participate in programming with your schools, even if it's just, schools have a lot of awesome events that are going on too. And, we're, as people living in Chicago, our public schools are part of our communities. And, I think about my neighborhood schools all the time in Pilsen, and I think about what they're doing and seeing all the really awesome activities that they're having. And it just furthers my work to continue to have that context and continue to have those interactions with those schools.
I cannot upvote that enough. And the strategy I heard you mention that was turning light bulbs in my head was just that maintaining that ability as a program leader to be able to connect a larger strategy with an individual school, an individual school leader, a group of students who you know by name. That is a great barometer. If you're a leader, asking yourself, am I close enough to the work to be able to make some of these really, organization altering decisions? And that's a question I ask myself every time I make a classroom visit and join our teams in practice, is I literally sit there and ask myself, how many of these kids can I call out by name right now? And if I don't know anyone in this room, I shouldn't be making decisions on their behalf. So my course of action then is to get my hands dirty and go introduce myself and learn a little bit about them and what they're going through and what brings them to the program. Or if I do know, then it's my responsibility to coach, and it's my responsibility to take the resources that I know we've created to help make our programs better, and be able to advocate for why these kids whose names that I know could benefit from the resources that we create and provide. So I'd recommend the same thing to any leaders out there who are wondering, am I close enough? Am I doing enough? Next time you walk into a classroom and see your programs happening live, ask yourself how many students' names you can recite just by looking at their faces. And that should tell you all you need to know. Ariel, what do you think?
You all are so brilliant. It's time for our final topic of the afternoon, which is advocacy as a leader. The arts are a disruptive community, and many take the lead in advocating for a number of essential issues that impact students, schools, teaching artists, and arts organizations at both the local, state, and national level. So what does it look like when leaders are tasked with important decisions to maintain the integrity of their values and beliefs, or to speak up on behalf of others? In this section, our residents will give us some insight into how they've navigated various advocacy initiatives, and I'll hand it off to Liz and Tyra to get us started.
Yeah, so I think Tyra and I are really great to think about for this question that we have, because we both work and have experience in organizations that have an education department within a larger arts organization. And so one of the curiosities we had was around navigating those organizational dynamics that impact what we can and can't do in our programs, right? So that could be like budgets, bureaucracy, hierarchy, and as leaders, how do we advocate for change in these systems? So Tyra, I'm gonna ask you if you have thoughts on that to start.
Yeah, I definitely do. I feel like this is such a broad question, so I will try to keep it brief in my response. So focusing on your respective institution, right? So what can you do internally? First, I would say having candid conversations with the folks who are in your department, and then also reaching out to your supervisor and or executive leaderships so that they can have like a clear understanding of the challenges that you're experiencing as an arts educator. I mean, if we're just being honest, you were hired because you're the expert. So they should rely on you, trust you to do your job. And it's also a great way to strengthen communication, like cross-departmental communication, and allows them to advocate to the stakeholders who have influence in the success of this work. And then I also think it's important to rely on folks that are outside of the organization as well. So kind of shifting gears externally a little bit. At least for me, it's been really helpful to rely on my network of arts partners That's why I'm so excited to be part of the cohort, right? And Ingenuity and relying on even an organization like Arts Ed Shy, that collective. I find that in those spaces, we're often able to articulate not just what's going on at our institutions, but also like all across the board, things that are impacting us on a local and national level. And I love being able to have those spaces where I'm able to have that support from a network of individuals who actually are champions of this work, and they understand just what we're dealing with. And also with that, trying to brainstorm and bring these conversations to the forefront. What can we do? Not just identifying the problems, but then taking steps to correct them. What can we do? Who are the parties that need to be involved for us to make this happen? Because we can't do it alone, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that you said really hit home for me, which is like this having the honest conversation. I don't know how much, like just being transparent with what's going on with both like the folks in the folks in my other departments at my organization, but also the folks that I'm hiring, right? One of the challenges that been working through at Second Story is pay equity and just making sure that the rate that we're offering is competitive for teaching artists like across the realm. And I sat in a bunch of conversations where I asked for honest feedback from our teaching artists about, what we were paying versus like what other folks were paying. We also had conversations with, as you were saying, other arts partners in Chicago, right, about like what their pay structure was and how they went about it, really to lean on both the person who is being affected, right, about what's going on, and also, people who have more experience for those solutions as well. So I really think about, transparency and just being open to feedback and open to failure, right? Like being able to say, okay, we didn't do that right, but let's work together to try and fix it and like do better the next time. I am super curious, since we've been talking a lot, like what are some other ways in which folks who are here in the Zoom room with us have learned to navigate, these organizational dynamics and how they advocate for change in these systems? Feel free to drop it in the chat.
I'm also looking forward to these responses.
Yes.
I promise you, you're not alone in this.
Like the truth of the matter is like we're all learning constantly, right? So we're in this cohort and we're doing this panel not just to hear from us, but to learn from folks who might have more experience or curiosities as well. So in the interest of time, I'm going to pass it over to our next two folks. And our second to last question. So Sophia and Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, so as folks working in arts nonprofit spaces, we are navigating a lot of different, departments and, thinking about our boards and our executive directors. So Andrew, what do you believe is the leadership responsibility for those folks to support a specific part of an arts organization mission, such as an education program, as well as their responsibility to students and schools?
Yeah, I think it connects to what we were talking about in our last question around like proximity to the work being something that unlocks the ability for leaders to understand how they fit into a mission. And the same is true for board members. And oftentimes I find that, in boards that I've engaged in and even been a part of myself, there are people who really care about the idea of the mission, really want to help, and just don't know how. And maybe they've been asked to be part of a board and they know someone who's part of the organization and want to be helpful, but don't quite know how they fit in just yet.
Mhm.
So some of the strategies that I think can be really helpful in them unlocking their own imagination and being able to zero in a little bit is one, creating a board that brings a diversity of experience. And I know that can be difficult. There are some boards that are really focused on fundraising. There are some boards that are really focused on creating kind of the foundations and structures of a nonprofit and a government organization that allow for it to sustain. And there are some that actually are involved in making decisions that affect everyone from all across the organization. And so bringing a diversity of experiences where they can kind of check each other, I think is important. I also think as programs folks, to be able to call in our board members with specific stories and things that have happened to us in the field that they can relate to, I think unlocks some of that confusion or kind of like lofty goals that might be stuck in their heads about like, I really want to help, I just don't know how. And then something that's been really effective for us over the last several years is that we've always had a student and an alumnus on our boards to be able to share their specific experiences and to drive some really important organizational change. And we found that it helps our board members stay more engaged when they know somebody personally who's a colleague of theirs who's also an alumnus of the organization. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel connected, and it checks their decision making in ways that I think even us as program staff can feel some tension in doing sometimes.
Mhm.
How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, having board members who particularly have experiences that reflect our stakeholders is really, really important. And I think one of the things that I'm thinking about with our board is we have multiple board members who have been teaching artists and artists in residence with in our organization. And that's like really vital feedback, to get from them within these conversations, these broader conversations that we're having about how the organization should move forward in different aspects. And yeah, it's just really, really awesome to hear from board members who have been on site, who have been interacting with students, and particularly having, students come onto like particular board member or board groups to provide even more insight on that is something that we're thinking about as well, that I think is really, really great opportunity to grow as an organization and create, sustainable missions for our students as well. Thanks. So now I'm going to pass it to Tyra.
If what Tyra was sharing with us before is any indication, I feel like, oh, are you with us? There you
I'm
are.
with you all.
I was all ready to cover for you.
You were ready. You stay ready, and got to get ready. I appreciate that, Andrew. And thank you, Sophia, for your insight as well. So now we're going to get into our final question, which actually is for you, Andrew. I'm so excited to get into this conversation with you. So we were just talking about different stakeholders, right? And one of them being funders. So when it comes to working with funders, the numbers are often like what is the barometer for programmatic success, right? How many programs we've delivered, the number of students, schools reached, neighborhoods, etc. But at the same time, organizations are working to increasingly create intentional and meaningful programming. And they're thinking about how they are creating those programs to provide the best experience for their students. So my question for you is, how do organizations navigate these tensions where growth equals vertical advancement and profit at the expense of building more slowly and meaningfully?
Yeah, if you can see my face, my face is my answer. And the tension there is that vertical advancement and profit goes this way, and building slowly and meaningfully goes this way. So of course there's tension. Of course it feels misaligned, because in many ways it is. But That said, I think there are things that organizations can do to alleviate some of that tension, and rather than chase money, fall back on values. And oftentimes those opportunities come to you when you are an organization that is living by its values. And that's something that our organization has revamped just in the last calendar year or so, is that we have revamped, retrained, and rebranded our core values so that they exist in every corner of our organization, all the way down to existing on posters in every classroom that we have programs in. And those core values apply to partnerships and apply to expansion, growth, and sustainability as well. And so if every member of your organization is speaking the same language and understanding that we value a certain set of things, you should be checking yourself against those values with every opportunity that you receive, every partnership that comes across your desk, and even every grant opportunity that you feel like you might be a fit for. Oftentimes when these opportunities come up, they're fast. There's a deadline that we have to meet. There are numbers that we have to produce. And that can feel misaligned with who we are and what we do more often than is healthy. And so having a set of core values that you can fall back on and ask yourself, is this right for us at this time? Usually guides you towards the right answer. And I know how tough it can be to say no to opportunities that feel almost too good to be true or too easy. But the truth is, you're going to be a lot more healthy as an organization that lives by its values than by an organization that is constantly chasing opportunity and then having to play catch up when you realize it's not quite aligned to who you are. What do you think?
I'm in agreement with everything that you just said. And that's why it's so important, right, for everyone within the organization to, like you said, be able to speak the same language and understand why we are doing the work, the importance behind it, and being able to articulate that to funders who are also interested in supporting those programs. But also with that, Andrew, at least at our organization, right, at Writers Theater, I sometimes feel that I'm in this place where sometimes I have to say no to potential partners because there are stipulations that are included in this, let's say, grant, right? Like a grant, and they are wanting me to focus on expanding beyond current partnerships. And I totally understand that. I'm in agreement with it. But with that being said, sometimes I come across this issue where I'm having to focus on expanding and creating these new partnerships while also honoring the ones that currently exist. And because we have a fixed budget, I'm not always able to find a plausible solution in real time. So I was just kind of curious if that's something that you've also experienced at your current or past organizations.
Absolutely. And I'm a sucker for honoring the partnerships that currently exist, because especially in schools, and our kind of flagship after school program is designed to have teaching artists work in small groups with kids, and so there is an enrollment cap in a lot of our programs that exist after school, and so many of our school partners are interested in having more arts partnerships during the day. Interested in partnerships reaching more of their student population. And what we find is that when we are really intentional about growing within our existing partners, it affects everything else. It affects our ability to recruit because our teaching artists see more kids within that school environment. It affects our relationship with the school because we're touching and having interactions with more staff members and school leaders throughout the year. And it affects our teaching artists' sense of personal responsibility to say, like, I work at this school and I am an embedded member of that community and I want to stay. And so
Yeah.
if your teaching artists want to stay and they
Yeah.
get better and they're working with siblings of their original kids who were there 5 years ago, like you're also saving yourself the struggles of hiring and having to rehire and having to train and having to retrain. Like it affects so many corners of your organization. And so, if anyone's worked with me before, they know I have like a saying where I'm like, I'd rather do things slow and right than fast and chaotic. So sometimes that means like squeezing all of the juice out of an existing partner before you even think about what it looks like to move on to someone else.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Andrew. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it back to Ariel.
Thank you all so much, and thank you to our residents for their thoughtful responses. I'm gonna actually, we're at the end of our time, and you all were a little bit shy in the Q&A, so we're gonna go ahead and skip that for now. But know that our residents are going to be available to you at their sessions, and so we'd love for you all to save the date for these upcoming sessions that we have.
Yeah, I'm going to fast forward here. Really quickly, I just want to say also to a big thank you to all of our residents for their thoughtful responses. We heard so many amazing seeds of wisdom and truth, from honoring strengths and seeing and connecting and amplifying leadership in all community members, horizontal leadership models, being open to feedback and failure, staying in touch with your why, and living by your values. So if this is any indication of what's to come in these upcoming constellation sessions, we definitely want to see you there, hear your questions, and have time for you to engage with the residents. So Ariel's going to preview a little bit here now.
Yeah, so we're just putting our constellation sessions on your radar. On the screen, you'll see our dates. So January 25th is Creative Feedback as a Tool for Arts Education Leadership, facilitated by Liz Rice. I believe she's gonna have her colleague with her as well. February 22nd is Synergy in Action, Cultivating Leadership Through Arts and Public Schools Collaboration, facilitated by Sophia. And then March 21st is From Band Member to Board Member, Developing a Culture of Student Leadership in Arts Programs, and that's facilitated by Andrew. Then April 18th, we'll hear from Tyra in Empowering Perspectives, Centering Black Voices in Arts Ed Leadership. And finally, we'll wrap up with Elena and Crescendo, Amplifying Youth Leadership in the Arts Classroom. So mark your calendars, and these will be up on our events page coming to you soon. And then also, when the webinar ends, you'll automatically be taken to our exit survey. But in case that doesn't happen, Courtney is dropping the link into the chat. But you can go to tinyurl.com/ingpanel23 to let us know your feedback. Remember that our goal is 75% of attendees today responding to the survey, and it only takes a few minutes. We really value your feedback and to help us continue to improve our learning offerings. So thank you to you all for being so wonderful in the chat, for engaging with us in all of the ways that you all felt comfortable. Thanks again to our brilliant panelists, and we're very excited for all the things that we have in store for you today. Have a wonderful afternoon, you all.
Thank you so much.